Let me know we're good.
Set.
Alrighty. Hello, everyone, and welcome to, I was going to say yet another episode. I don't know what the heck I'm talking about because this is my first time giving a talk here, but either way, hi, I'm Tess, and my co-presenter Cris is over there. This is FMOD for a programmer. I'll get into what the heck we're going to be talking about, but first, I don't know, let's talk about little ol' us. Um, oops, sorry, there we are. My mouse is on the wrong screen. Haha. So hi, my name is Tess Winlock. I have gone through currently level IGA levels 1 and 2. I'm currently going through IGA level 3 with Cris as my lovely prefect. Go Team Bladesong, go Warriors. Um, I have about a year's worth of gameplay programming under my belt at the moment. I'm currently working on a little fun, a little project, very indie, very on the side, called Tombstone Taxi. You can go wishlist it now on PlayStation and Steam. I'm an avid GM, so fun voices might happen. I'm sorry, not sorry, basically. And then, oh yeah, I also have about 14 years of software engineering experience across a variety of different companies in the tech sector. There's some logos, I don't know, man, that happened. But I just made the switch over about a year ago, kind of, deciding, hey, I think I don't want to do that no more. So here we are. And my lovely partner in both crime and life, Cris.
Hello, I'm Cris. I'm a music producer by training, and I also am a sound designer. I also used to be a software engineer for about 10 years before I decided that my calling in life was actually making beep boop noises. And you can find my music under my artist name, Ariasa. Currently, I am working on, if anyone here knows Chase Middleton, one of the IGA mods, I wrote the soundtrack for his game Fish Astronomy. Um, yes, and yeah, I also am a part-time like studio manager at Pure Mind Studios, which is also where I did my music production training. So yes, I have a lot of sound and audio production background, and I also worked on at some tech companies. There's some logos. We don't talk about that anymore. We can keep going.
All right, let's keep moving on. So yeah, today what we're going to kind of do is we got a lot to cover. We're definitely going to talk about FMOD, but we're going to kind of first give you kind of an overview of audio. I do think that as part of IGA, we've definitely talked a bit about audio, but I want to make sure we really kind of give you all a view of where FMOD sits sort of in the audio pipeline, as well as sort of then like how to end up using the FMOD as we kind of go through the different parts of the talk. We'll go into what audio middleware is also, and how to use FMOD, how to integrate that into Unity, and then what I call advanced FMOD, or as Cris would probably say, my job. And I think we might close out with questions and other things, time allowing. So let's kick it off. Cris, you want to take it away?
Yeah, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about what is audio, the field. So if you go to the next slide. So a lot of teams actually have like one or maybe two audio people, but the field itself is huge. Like you might have heard of a composer, you might have heard of a sound designer, you might have heard of a voice actor, but actually there's a lot of other parts of audio. There is the implementation, which we're going to talk about today, which is like using FMOD, Sonity, etc. Um, but also, like, if you're, for example, if you're in the field of voice acting, there's an entire subfield for dialogue editing and production. So the people who, if you're watching a sci-fi movie and it sounds like they're talking through a helmet, that's dialogue production. Audio engineering we'll also talk a little bit about today because that's the part that's like coding the sounds into the engine. Some people talk about audio design, which is like thinking about the entire audio experience of the game. And then stuff that is closer to more of like the recording aspects of sound is like mix engineering, mastering, and that sort of thing. I'm not going to go too deep into that, but just know that audio is huge. And also, a composer has and a music producer are slightly different skill sets, but often we do both. So, yes. And let's keep going. All right. I'm going to talk a little bit about what an audio workflow looks like. This is a huge oversimplification of the audio field, but I'm going to give you sort of like broad strokes. You may start with some raw sound things. So that might be composing some music. which also goes deeper. Like you might want to record musicians, for example. You might make some sound effects by recording like Foley, or you might do field recording, like that has entire subfields as well. And then within the dialogue world, there's like recording voice lines and that sort of thing. And if you want to do voice acting in your game, actually something to think about is that this puts a lot of pressure on the narrative because you need that locked in really early. Otherwise, if you have to re-record your voice lines, then it can become a lot more work very quickly. And it's also a lot of coordination if you have like several voice actors. Yeah, but for each of these subfields, after you record the things, there is a phase called mixing, and that's like cleaning it up, making it fit to the vibe of whatever it is that you're trying to fit it into, whether it be like, I want to fit it into the world. There's all of the effects that you add, putting it into a space, and then also balancing all of your sounds, which is extremely important. If you've ever listened to something on like your AirPods and then you listen to it again in your car and it sounds extremely different, that is mixing. That's like it could be a bad mix. Um, and then after that, there's something called mastering, and that tends to have something to do with volume levels and standardizing them. Sometimes I do this very fast and skip it for deadlines, but like mastering can be also very important. But a good way to think about it is if you're listening on Spotify and like the you don't have to change the volume knob when you listen from one song to the next. That's because it's been mastered and the volumes have been standardized. So all of these fields do all of these steps, and before we start putting them into the middleware. And so, like, if you get a sound pack, for example, we've done all of these things up until the mastering phase, and that's when you get your assets, and then you put it into the middleware, and then that's where you start doing things like setting up audio events, putting them into 3D space, dynamic music, reverb zones, etc. Yeah, and then after that, there's mixing again, but now you have to balance the voices with the sound effects with the music and make sure that you can hear the dialogue over like your like sick EDM beat underneath. So yeah, that's a very fast overview of audio.
And we'll be talking about this one little bit right here, in sort of where everything kind of comes together, and where hopefully you have an interface with us programmer humans. So yeah, I'm gonna start talking about audio middleware. So what is audio middleware? Well, if you don't already know, I mean, this is sort of in Unity, you see it as the kind of part of the engine where you get to play a sound or mix that sound or other things like that. Effectively, audio middleware is the thing that kind of handles all the messy bits of playing sound, whether that be memory management or actually, playing, starting, stopping a sound, sort of, all of those fun things. But it also acts as an interface between you and your audio team, ideally. If you don't have an audio team, well, then it acts between an interface between you and the sonic assets that you have. To a large extent, the reason why you have this is because it just saves you a ton of time. You want to make sure that you reduce the amount of code that you have to write. You can certainly use the thing that comes with Unity. However, I suggest using one of these more powerful engines out there because they actually do give you additional tools to save you time, ideally save you money associated with these things, because you can do things along the lines of, I have in the past created my own sounds, me, a programmer human, not an audio person, by kit bashing two sounds together to make something really neat that works out really well. And so as a result, you can kind of like gain some benefits by using these softwares. Additionally, let's also put it this way. If you, my dear programmer friends, say the words, but it's so easy, the number of times that makes your poor producer cringe and cry a little bit is probably rather high. Like, we're very guilty of but I can do it. And it's like, you 100% can. But you also have to remember not just that the code that you write is real, but also so are the bugs that you accidentally create. And also so are the interactions with all the different systems. And so are all the other things that you haven't thought about yet. Because unfortunately, playing sounds is the tip of the iceberg. Everything else is so much bigger and so much harder. And having these sort of middleware components really reduces that overhead on you and therefore gives you more time and ideally would make your producer friends happy with you. Also, let's be honest, this empowers your audio people. They can do things, whether that be in Engine or that be in FMOD, and that creates this lovely little thing where they can go off and make some really awesome things, and you can pull that in and not have to worry about how complicated it is to figure out, how do I do randomization on different floors? Who cares? They do it. It's great. It's a lovely little interface. Abstraction is a wonderful thing. Hopefully, you can enjoy that. I also do want to say, though, as we are talking about FMOD today, any middleware is fine. FMOD is the thing that I understand the best, that I have personally played with. I have not touched Wise, Cryware, any of these other ones. I just took some names from a website and slapped them on here. But honestly, any middleware is fine. It doesn't really matter what the middleware is. Just using an interface that sort of abstracts away and gives you some benefit is good. And especially if you have an audio person, please talk to them and talk to them about what their preferred tool is. I'm going to talk about FMOD today, but if they know Wise, figure out Wise, please. Use the skill set that they have, as is often a thing with almost anything in game development, or actually just a thing in kind of any team situation. Build off the skills you have on your team. That's going to be my point. So, just do it. Also, fun fact. I don't know if you all know this, but actually you're already using middleware. Unity's native audio is FMOD. It's just that their license expired a very significant age ago. So you're using a very outdated version of FMOD in Engine. What we're going to talk about is how to use FMOD Studio, which is an external program that then you can pull that into Unity. So let's get into that. How to use FMOD. I'm actually going to open up FMOD and show you how to do that. But before we get there, I want to sort of talk about the project layout, but I also want to talk about some fundamental concepts in FMOD to kind of get you started. Big disclaimer up top. Almost everything that we talk about here falls into the realm of what the audio person should likely be handling. But at the same time, it is very important to use the same language. Or, if you're a solo dev doing this on your own, guess what? That's now your job too, because all the jobs are yours. Haha. And so, this way you kind of have the tools to sort of understand, at the very least, how to use FMOD from the highest of levels. There's so much more complexity here. One nice thing about FMOD is also that there's a bunch of tutorials out there and a bunch of stuff that you can go out there and read. And the documentation is pretty solid, I'll say that. But first, let's talk about project setup. So when I say project setup, I'm talking here about GitHub setup or projects, or like where these file systems exist, where these projects exist in my file system. So the way that I tend to set these things up is that I have my project audio. I have a separate audio project, and this would be checked into GitHub, or choose your your backup engine of choice, whether that be like you use GitHub or you use Google Drive. I don't really care. You stick it over into something in a separate directory. This is your FMOD project. This is where FMOD Studio, the external program, will be running. And what happens is that you then build, which is more or less a compilation step, similar to how Unity compiles, these things called banks, and that will then be dropped into your Unity project, and then that's what you end up using inside of the engine, using the FMOD for Unity package. So these are typically two distinct things. That way, if you have an audio person, they can go ahead and have whatever backup tools they want, or if you're going to use Git, they can check in things to their own GitHub repository without having to worry about that. And then you have your separate thing where all they're really doing is just checking in new banks as they kind of go. This kind of creates a nice little separation for you, and it allows them to kind of like iterate as fast as they desire. Let's talk a little bit about what banks are. So banks are effectively a compiled group of sounds exported for the game. So that means that, like, if I want to, say, have all of my UI sounds loaded, I will always load those into memory because, let's be honest, your UI is going to probably be around for a long time. So you load those all into memory. So you might have a bank associated with UI. You might also have a bank associated with level 1. So you have level 1 loaded in. But once you're done with level 1, you can unload that bank. So that way you can free up the memory.
She wants to go out.
I think that someone's mic is unmuted, and you might want to mute yourself. I would appreciate that. Thank you. So yes, that allows you to sort of handle memory management yourself. Every sound is associated with it must be associated with the bank to be pulled into the game at all, but it also can be associated with a bus or a group of sound that can then be leveled. So in other words, you can adjust things. Have you ever gone into a settings menu of a game and you've seen like, oh, I can do these little sliders for music or for sound effects or whatever, that ends up being a bus that you're more or less controlling. It's sort of saying all these sounds, I'm going to turn down their levels or turn up their levels. That way they have a different volume. Sound can be in both of them. That's also an unmuted mic. I would love it if y'all could mute. Thank you. But yes, that allows you to sort of adjust these things. Sounds can be in both different banks and different buses. All good. You can have UI sounds as a bank. You can have UI sounds as a bus. You can have level 1 sounds that are in different buses, all that fun stuff. But fundamentally, the unit of these sounds is an event, and that's going to be the kind of fundamental thing. I wrote one shot here. It's actually called an action in the FMOD. I don't know what I was thinking there. But either way, events come in 2 flavors. One is an action, and one is a timeline. Actions are very one shot, like that's a footstep, a punch, a whatever. And music or ambiance is going to be a timeline, something that is looped over for a very long period of time. So those things can also be 2D, or they can be 3D. If they are 2D, then that means that they don't really have a spatial component. If they're 3D, then they can exist in this 3D space above, below you, left, right, whatever. Now, demo gods allowing, we are going to actually set up a brand new FMOD project. So I'm going to stop presenting right now, or stop sharing that presentation, and go crack open FMOD. So I've already done this step. Largely, go download FMOD, open it up. You'll see this screen first. I'm going to click New Project. Hi, okay, darn it. I'm going to have to turn off my Discord notifications. I don't remember how to do that. Anyway, just don't ping me. So we have a new project now. And then I go save. I'm going to create a new thing. You can see that I created live demo 1. This is going to be live demo 2. Look at that. Dry runs, man. Dev projects, FMOD. Live demo 2. Got a new project in my hand. So FMOD, as we sort of exist here in this lovely little place, we have events, banks, assets. You notice that I mentioned banks earlier. Here we have our master bank. I'm also now going to open up the different windows. So for this one, I'm going to go open up the audio bin. So the audio bin is effectively where all of my different sounds are raw. So if you notice, I said events are the things that are the fundamental things of sounds. Assets are basically what's behind those events. So when I said I built that sound a long time ago, I built it out of a series of assets. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go import all my assets. And so I got a bunch of them here. So let's go make sure I get all these. And I go open all those guys. Let's make sure that they sound good. So you might want to check that in advance. So beautiful. Awesome. It's amazing. I think that's great. And so what we're now going to do is sort of like, it's also very advisable that you might want to organize these things. So, so we have environment, and then we also have footsteps. So I'm going to drag my little foot mud things into footsteps and then shrink that down and grab all my little environment guys, drop them into environments. Now I just like to do an organization thing. I suggest you do this on basically everything you do. Over on events, I can also right click and create a folder, and let's create another organizational folder. I can go click and do the magical thing of click and drag. So now, if you remember, I mentioned that there's 4 different kinds of events. There's 2D and 3D actions and 2D and 3D timelines. Because these are environment noises, because I've got that lovely bubbling fountain sound, we end up wanting to create a 3D timeline. Additionally, because this is a new event that we want to have for every asset, we click create. So what that does, that creates this lovely thing where we now can see all the different sounds. We can click into the different sound and sort of like drag this along and start playing midway through and kind of go, yeah, sounds wonderful, sounds awesome. We got our wind high over here. Yeah, sounds perfect. So we got a nice amount of sort of basic sounds going right now. But you'll notice that they say unassigned. So if you remember, I said banks are the fundamental unit of sort of like importing things into memory. So to do that, I kind of want to make sure that they're assigned to a bank. Right now, they aren't. So to fix that, I go to assign this to a bank. I browse for the master bank, and I do that. In a game, especially of substantial size, you'll want to make sure that you have different banks for different things, so that you can load and unload them as memory allows. But this is a demo with 15 sounds, y'all. It's fine. So I'm just going to kind of have one bank going. I'm going to create a new folder to do footsteps. And let's go do this. So if you ever played a game And when you're walking over different surfaces, you might want to have a different footstep play, right? So you might want to have, oh, when I'm walking on mud, I have mud sounds play. When I'm walking on dirt, I have dirt sounds play, that kind of a thing, to kind of like make that immersion happen there. So the footsteps, luckily, this lovely little library that we got has that. So we have kind of like a little mud sound. Sounds perfect. We got a little stompy sound, I think, going here. Sounds great. Awesome. So I think that we can definitely use those sounds. So to end up doing that, you create a new event. And so I'm just going to call this one footstep. And oh, I forgot, I need to assign it to a bank, as we said earlier. Cool. And now I'm going to add a new sheet. So I mentioned that there are timelines and actions, but I lied. I lied, guys. There's actually another one here. There is a third kind, which is a parameter sheet. So a parameter sheet is effectively allowing the engines, allowing Unity to provide to FMOD a parameter that can change the way the sounds play. And you can do all sorts of crazy things inside of FMOD with this. This is going to show you the most fundamental usage, which is realistically just doing different ground types mean different sounds play. So I'm going to do a new parameter. We're going to select a labeled parameters. So there's different kinds of the ones that are built in here. So you can have like direction, elevation, those kind of get pulled in from Unity. There's also user-based ones that you can have where you can have continuous, which is basically a float, a 0, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, you can kind of have a continuous thing. Discrete, which is 0 or 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, or labeled, which is still 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, but just with a nice little string label in FMOD. It doesn't mean anything to Unity. Unity is still going to pass you 0, 1, 2. It's just that you get to nicely see what 0, 1, and 2 mean. So for ground type, I also want to remind everyone that what I am doing right now is the work that a sound designer would typically do. This parameter, what its values are and everything, would be a conversation between the programmer and the sound designer to ensure that you guys have a good understanding. I'm showing you how to do this because in the case you're a solo dev, you want to be able to do this, but also just because I think it's cool. But this would definitely be part of their job, their skill set, their kit, as it were. And I'm kind of stepping on the toes just really to show you a little bit of how to do this and understand what the amount of detail work that goes into a lot of this stuff. So when you ask for a ground type, okay, cool. Let's start talking about what the different ground types should be. So I fortunately already have a Unity project, which we'll discuss later. But I already have decided on this. So grass is 0. So we'll put in, we'll go add this. This is grass. I added in, it seems like dirt is 3. So mud is 1. Looks like stone is 2. And then I'll add another one for dirt. Cool. Initial value will be grass, and we go, okay. So I now have this lovely thing over here where you can see all the different sort of types. So I have mud, stone, dirt, and you can see that this little ground type parameter changes based off of me dragging it up or down. So yeah, it's a 0, 1, 2, 3. So let's say that I want to do grass. So I think that I like this foot tap sound. I've done obviously some advanced thought on this. So yeah. It sounds nice and soft for grass. So let's go add tap into that. So just click and drag, and it creates this lovely little multi-instrument. So multi-instrument will play any sound that sort of happens here. I choose random just because I like that better. And then there's this cool thing where I hit play. So it then ends up playing each of them in individual. It can choose which one it's going to play randomly, which is great because now I don't have to have the same one footstep sound every time I take a step. Now let's do that again for mud. And let's go for stomp for stone. And for dirt, we're going to do a louder foot tap because dirt is a little harder packed. Go away. And so that adds in multi-instruments for each of these things. You can see that they all have different lengths. Like some of them are 3 sounds. Some of them are 5 sounds. So yeah, I have all that. But let's say I want to go one step further. I'm going to show you one more trick that my lovely sound design partner has shown me. And that is that you can also make 3 sounds go actually really far because you can also add modulation to randomize the pitch. What this does is this just sort of says, I'm going to every time that I play this sound, randomly pitch it up, pitch it down. And so I can, when I hit tap, oops, I'm not on stone. There we go. So it sounds slightly different each time. I can then go do that for each of these things. And this is where the detail work of a sound designer comes in. This is all little tweaks and stuff like that you'd end up doing, and stuff that I love my sound design partners for doing. So yeah, we end up having footsteps. We have our little bubbles. We have our waves. We play that. Sounds great. So we hit save. But now let's talk about sending this over to Unity. So I'll talk about how this will work on the Unity side in just a hot second. But before we get there, let's actually send it in a way that Unity can actually read it. So to do that, we go to Edit, Preferences. Didn't hit Preferences. There we go. Got to Preferences. Build. So this again is basically, if we think of Unity compiling a thing and making an output for you to go play on other platforms. Similarly, FMOD needs to do the same, and you need to tell it where it's going to output its directories. So what I do is that I usually just go to my dev projects, go to my Unity, click on this example Unity project, and then I put this in Assets, FMOD banks. So I click Select Folder. What this will do is that basically every time I hit the build, it will clear out what's in there and replace it with new compiled banks based off of what I've done. So when I hit Build All Platforms, you'll see over on the Unity side, it'll go, oh gosh, I got a new thing. But before we get into talking about Unity and all that other fun stuff, go away. Let's go talk about that. What's our system design? So let's talk Unity's audio system. And by Unity's audio system, I mean the system I built in Unity to make audio happen with FMOD. Yes. It's me doing the coding thing, not the Unity, but anyway, whatever. First off, to set this up, I'm going to link a document at the end that kind of goes over the installation steps for how to set this all up, and installing this from the FMOD store. Realistically, it links to FMOD's documentation, which is wonderful on this, and they have a utterly glorious setup wizard that will help you guide you through this project. I'm not really going to cover that here. I'm just going to kind of mention it exists. Do it. But when I'm talking about our audio system, as a programmer, I want to think about sort of what I want to accomplish with the system I'm writing. So fundamentally, I want to abstract away FMOD. I don't really want random HP component to say, hey, FMOD. I want something else to do that. So that way, if I need to change the way that it happens or add extra complexity, it can all be in this one system. Additionally, I want to make it easy for me to reference sounds throughout the code in some way, shape, or form. Like, how do I make sure that when I click an UI button, that UI knows this sound is the thing I want to play? And then finally, I want to make sure that my non-technical folks, like we have another sound designer on one of our games, that they can also add sounds in Engine, which means that I don't want to have to add a new like enum value for every sound. That would be bad because that would be code that you can do that. And so to that end, when we talk about audio events, we want to have something that has a reference that is also singleton and global. We only want to have one UI. When we say UI click positive or whatever, we want to have UI click positive means one thing. It is a singleton. In other words, there's only one thing in the game that has that. Real nice thing if you're using Unity is we have this thing called scriptable objects that are just bloody glorious. I have forced our poor animation or art and animation as well as audio folk to end up working in scriptable objects, as well as our designers. They're wonderful things because they can provide pretty simple to use functionality for people that are not programmers to create things that you can then reference in code. So what that'll end up looking like is I have a scriptable object that what it'll have is, I promised you boxes and lines, y'all, that has effectively a event reference, which references an actual FMOD event. If you remember, everything is an event, whether that be the timeline or the actions or whatever. And then it has the configuration as to, is this a one shot? Is this spatial? Do I need to send a transform along the way? All that fun stuff. And then the audio manager, my singleton audio manager, there's one of those in existence. When you start up the program, my audio manager kicks on in. You can then call play on, and it will figure out how to play that spatially. It'll add in the sort of like, it'll say, oh, hey, I need to know what the transform is. Okay, cool. So I'll slap that transform on there so that way FMOD knows about it. And other game objects, all they really do is that they have a reference of, I need to play this sound when this thing happens, right? They say, cool, UI click happens. So my UI, my button event in Unity kind of goes and passes this lovely little object off to the audio manager in FMOD. Now, I do want to make a call out here that, which is that this is really good for things that are complex and sort of bespoke. In other words, footsteps is a wonderful example of that because it just becomes a little bit more of a pain in the butt to do it, via game objects alone. You absolutely can, but it is just an easier way to do it in code. I also will say, though, that a lot of what I'm doing here can also just be done with a lot of FMOD components, and I'll show you that in right now. So let's go hop back over to that Unity project. So we have this lovely Unity project. My FMOD banks are up to date. And so I'm going to show off this setup. So fundamentally, I have this audio event. As I stated before, it's a scriptable object. And so I can go to the asset menu and create a new scriptable object. If you don't know about scriptable objects, they're really freaking cool. Highly recommend you go find out. There's a ton of videos out there in the interwebs to go do that. But I click create scriptable object and audio event. Creates me a new audio event. Let's add in that footsteps event that I have. So because this audio event has a event reference, FMOD event, I can then go ahead and search for that here. Lovely thing about FMOD is that it knows it creates this nice little drop down here. And I go, oh yeah, I'm looking for footsteps because it's a footstep event. So I add footsteps. Great. They're one shot. They're not spatial, and I'm not going to attach them to a game object. They pretty much are just going to play, which is all I need. I then might also want, I got some wave sound, so maybe I'll create another scriptable object for waves. And oh wait, I don't, and so I can go ahead and do environment, oops, waves. And I'm gonna, wait, it's spatial, and that one I might attach to one shot, actually, let's say it's just spatial, just exists in the environment. What that means is that when I get closer or farther from a thing. Now, to attach these to these, I have a bunch of code. You can go check it out. There's a player controller here. That player controller has a footstep event that basically is going to take one of my lovely little audio events. Again, these are the ground tags that I had before. What these reference is effectively tags in Unity. So dirt has the dirt tag. You see here, I've got dirt. And every time that I'm walking over a thing, I'm raycasting down to go see what the surface type basically is, and then I'm passing that along to FMOD. I won't go into too much of the code. I will share this all afterwards, just in the interest of time. Y'all can go take a look at that. All that does is it ends up passing along this footstep event and says, hey, grass, I'm standing on a grass. With the waves, I then actually, I just attached an FMOD Studio Event Emitter, which is just add component, FMOD Studio Event Emitter. And with all of these, I'm going to just actually, instead of using the wave thing that I have over there, I'm going to just use it by default from, I'm not doing anything too particularly complicated here. So it's not too bad to use the FMOD thing. This is another thing I want to point out is, like, much as I build components and I add my own complexity, it's also perfectly fine to use out of the box studio event emitters and other fun things like that. FMOD is perfectly serviceable on its own. Finally, let's add this lovely little fountain. We're going to have that beautiful bubbling sound that we heard earlier and make sure that has sounds associated with it. So with all that, I'm now going to hit play. Hopefully, we'll start hearing sounds as we wander around this level. So as you can hear, hopefully, you can hear this lovely little cacophony of sounds that have all been made. But there is some complications here. I have a little cave area, but I'm not echoing. If I head over to this bubble area, it stopped playing. And so with that, I'm going to pass it off to my dear and wonderful Cris. Please be kind. And I will stop my stream.
Yeah, it's my turn. Y'all can see my
It's your
screen.
turn.
All right, I'm gonna talk about reverb zones. So Tess was mentioning that, by the way, I can't see any of you in chat anymore, so
I will
you can say whatever you want. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about reverb zones. So there was supposed to be a little bit of echoiness in that cave. If you don't know what reverb is, in audio, reverb is the reflections of sound off of surfaces. the way that you know that you're in a cathedral, for example, is actually the length of time it takes for a sound to bounce off the wall and come back to your ears. And so that like subconsciously your brain knows how big of a space you're in because of the tail of that that trailing sound. So there are plugins called Reverb, and I am not going to build it real time because it's a lot of detail work that takes a lot of time. So I'm just going to show you what I did. So in FMOD, we're looking at the mixer view here. And what I've
How do you
done is
get to
I've
the
set
mixer
up
view, dear?
what? Oh,
How do you get to
yes.
the
Well,
mixer view?
yes, you can either go window mixer, or you can hit Control 2, which is what I normally do, or Command 2 since I have Mac muscle memory. But yeah, so I've got a reverb here, and there's actually a lot of defaults that you can use, so you don't even need to necessarily know um, all of the details about the audio, like all of what all these knobs do. And so I've also already done some processing on these footsteps.
They don't have to know.
You can hear that, right?
You're a
So
little
yeah, now
quiet,
it sounds
but
like you're yeah. Now it sounds like you're in a cave. So yeah, what I did here was I set up this little reverb return. And I set up this thing called a snapshot, which is actually a special kind of event. It is very similar to these events that we have here in the event view, but this is more of like a saved preset. And what I did was I took these buses. So for the environment, I put it on a send, which basically is you can think of it as like a parallel circuit where you send the signal of the environment sound. It's both playing on the environment group and also a parallel signal is sent to the reverb send and has that has the echoiness on it. And I did the same thing with the sound effects group, which is where the footsteps are happening. So that's how you make a little reverb reverb zone. So we can take a look at it in Unity. Doo-doo-doo. Yeah, so that's how that works.
I might want to show off. How did you end up hooking that up in Unity? The
Oh
cave
yeah,
thing on. You can look at the cave on the.
yes.
Yeah.
It actually looks very similar to you created a box collider on. Oh yeah, it's a
Yep.
trigger. Okay, yeah. Um, so yes, so there is a box collider in this little cave area. Kind of small, but there we go. So you can put just an FMOD Studio event emitter on it, and the event that you set it to is just that cave snapshot. And we have here we chose the player as the collision tag. So then you can tell it basically on trigger enter. So when we trigger the box collider, it triggers this cave snapshot. So you walk in, it goes to the cave preset and now sounds super echoey. And then when you exit the box collider, then it stops doing the cave preset. So yeah, it's pretty simple. And then some other fun things to talk about, just so that you know a little bit about like what kind of power, how powerful you can make your sound designers if you use something like FMOD. It actually gives us, if you look down here, there's a lot of like just default processing that you can do. Like if you right click here, there's all of these things that maybe you have or have not heard of, like EQ and compressor and stuff. And so a person like me can actually go in and make these sounds sound way different. So I'm just going to show you what the original, actually you already know what the original sounds like, but
Still play it for them.
yeah, we'll listen to
I
it
love them to
again.
hear it in all its glory.
Great. All right. So to my ear, this actually sounds like Tess is very close to the microphone. So I'm just doing a little bit of EQ here, and my hand is very caffeine jittery right now. I I put some compression through it. More EQ. And now it sounds slightly more bubbly and a little bit farther away. I'm not going to explain all of this because that's like, unless people are interested, you can like DM me after. But
Save that after, yeah.
Yeah.
Wait,
Another
before you
fun
go,
one.
what is that blue thing at the top?
Oh, yes, I forgot about that. This is a loop region. So actually, if you've ever dealt with sound packs where you need to loop a sound and it needs to be like perfectly loopable, and if it's not perfectly loopable, you hear a pop at the end of the loop. This actually solves that problem for you. I can create a loop region. There's no pop, and actually there's a little transition region here. Okay, I'm gonna stop that. So you can make a little transition region here where you can crossfade the sound with itself. And so you don't have to do a lot of crazy audio processing, and this like changed my life when I learned about it because composing music that is loopable is very difficult to do. I mean, it isn't. Once you learn the tricks, you can do it. But also, it's nice to not have to think about it too much.
It's also nice
So
just
yeah,
being able to not have to do that myself as a programmer human who bought an asset pack and is like, why doesn't this right?
yeah, exactly. And in order to make a loop region, you just right click in this little black area, and then you can loop. I don't know what happens when there's two loop regions though. I'm not sure what that's gonna
I'm
do.
afraid.
Yeah. There's other fancy kinds of regions. I'm not gonna go too deep into it. Magnet regions are fun. I used it for another project called Living Hotel. And then yeah. And then waves. Here's another fun one. I'm just gonna go over some of the processing I did here. We'll listen to actually this one has a lot of stuff on it. So I'm just gonna turn all of, oh my God. All right.
If there's ever any doubt that audio people do stuff.
Oh my God, there's still stuff on here.
Was I
All right.
breathing directly into the mic? Yes. Yes, I was.
Yeah, it's great. That's the original sound. And after you add all this processing, it sounds very different. Oh God.
You do work, I say.
It sounds slightly more like waves. Yeah, if anyone's interested in this type of stuff, definitely DM me afterward. I love talking about like just nerding out over audio stuff. Okay. I think
One last thing. One
yes.
last thing I think I also forgot to cover, if you don't mind covering it, dear, is buses. I forgot to actually do those.
Oh, yes. Buses. That's these things. So these are actually groups of events. So you see here all of the events that Tess had created. I think you went a little bit over it, but the cool thing about buses is actually when you group all of the events into like environment, sound effects, and I might like for me, I would also create one called music, and then I might create one called UI. And you can actually, this is how you balance all of your sounds in the game. And doing that in Unity or even like in code is just a lot of work. Here, this is how I would normally structure it. Because really all you have to do now is sit there and you can actually go into live update mode and boop, and I can actually hook it up real time to Unity and actually watch the sounds play in real time. Come on. Here you go. So actually I'll put this over here. So there you go. Now you can see the meters going. And so this is actually how I would tend to mix a game when I'm working on it. And you can watch the reverb zone go. Well, the only annoying thing is that when you change windows, it stops playing the sound. But yeah. So that's good for debugging, actually. If you have like one really loud sound and you want to really fine tune that, this is what I typically do. Okay. I think I'll finish off the talk.
Yep, take us home. I
Sweet.
mean, we are home, but like, finish it up.
All right. Last topic. Talking to an audio person. If you're working with an audio person who's doing implementation, these are some topics that you could talk to them about, and it'll probably make your game sound a lot better. So where and when will the audio events play in the game world? That's something we definitely like to know. So like, if there is a jungle sound that's happening in your town, we like to know when that's gonna happen. Or like when is the music going to play, that sort of a thing, just so that we can get that timing right. Parameters, we already talked about parameters. What parameters should we send to FMOD? So like player health, if you have a low health heartbeat, that's a thing that we definitely like to know. Number of opponents, so that sometimes is how you determine whether you're in battle or not. Like I was talking in the chat, like sometimes the drums come in when you're in a fight. Often it's number of opponents. Distance is a thing for like attenuation, getting close to a fountain. Other stuff is how will dialogue sounds be triggered? If you have voice actors, are you going to play the whole line? If you have like Animal Crossing sounds, is it going to trigger a sound every single character, every space, that sort of a thing? What naming convention should we follow? This is actually really important. There are so many sounds that you put in a game, and having a naming convention is just it'll make your life so much easier. And I have an example in the next slide. How will UI sounds be triggered? That also is a good thing to talk about, especially if you're using Canvas versus UI Toolkit. Sometimes the sounds get triggered differently for Unity specifically. And then another one is how will music be triggered and when should it stop? And I'm talking specifically like if you change levels and you're in a loading screen, should the music still be playing? If you're in a dungeon and you're going to multiple floors, do you want the song to restart every time you enter a new room? Or do you want it to keep playing? Because actually, often if it restarts every single time, it's going to drive your players crazy. So that kind of a thing is also very important to know for someone who's implementing audio. And then, yeah, this is just some example naming conventions that I use. I typically go by category, and I try to make it as clear as possible. Yeah, you might just want to look at it afterward because it's a lot of stuff.
We have a lot of things in this presentation you might want to look at afterwards. I will say that
Yes.
we will be obviously sharing this afterwards, as well as there's definitely going to be there's a link of so many resources here, but also one of them is definitely that I've written everything you just heard today into a Google Doc that hopefully you guys can use if you so feel. There's also linked in there the GitHub projects for everything you just saw, which includes my lovely notes that I guess you can use if you so feel. I don't know why you would do that, but okay. Yeah. I think any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and just go ahead and ask. Mark is very excited to take my sounds. I'll just drop the presentation links into the chat right now since I'm here. I think actually I don't know if that one's open yet. Oh, it is. Ah, look at me being prepared. Yeah, feel free to shoot any questions in the chat or anything. Oh yes, F for applause, I guess, or whatever. I don't know, people. Yeah, it's happening. We did it. Chris is awesome.
Oh my gosh, what a beautiful F.
I love it.
I gotta say, I've always had this dream of making an entire game of just mouth sounds. Like, I want this to happen one day. If anyone wants to do that, please reach out to me.
Ding. Yeah. All the other fun noises that we can end up making.
There is a game that does that. If anyone's played Batter Up, it's a VR game, and like you're basically baking cakes or donuts or something, and the microwave just goes like, ding. Yes. Oh, okay. I need to play
Hidden
Hidden
Folks.
Folks.
All right,
I
I
have a
guess we gotta go
question,
find.
actually, if that's
Yeah.
okay.
Of course.
Yeah.
All right. So I know you guys mentioned earlier about like working with like animators and like artists and stuff on sounds. Can
Mhm.
you elaborate more on that? Like what's expected of like these like animators and artists to know and like for like more efficient collaboration?
Such a good question. Yeah, I can take that. So, actually, right now in level 3, we have a 2D artist and animator who uses Spine. And one of the things you can do with Spine is actually make footstep events. And so basically the animator will choose which frame is when the footstep triggers, and then that'll get sent to Unity, and then the audio manager, so then Tess can send that footstep event to me, and then I will trigger the footstep sound. And then we also use this for climbing as well. So like every time the hand touches the wall, for example, on one of our other jam games. Um, and yeah, so that kind of a thing. Basically, like which frame do you want to trigger a sound on? And for that, actually, too, if you have a recording of the animation, a sound designer definitely wants to have just like an MP4 of it or something, because then we will specifically time the sound to that animation so that it like works very seamlessly. I hope that
And
answers
you
your
guys have
question.
definitely been sending a
Yes, it
lot of
does.
things
Thank
across
you.
each other. Thank you for the question. There's definitely also been a lot of conversation, I think, with you and the artist about like vibe and pictures and
Oh,
seeing
yes.
the roughs and stuff like that. So
Yes.
they're lovely
I'm a
artists.
person, yeah. I'm a person who works really well with visuals. And also you'll hear a lot too that like sound people really love adjectives and vibes and feelings and emotions. And that's kind of the thing that helps us determine what kind of sounds to go with, right? Like if a hallway is supposed to be to like invite exploration, it's going to sound very different from a hallway that is filled with dread. And so like those are the kinds of things that we think about when we're like creating like a sonic world.
Yeah, I'm working with a composer right now on like releasing just like a little like game because we just had IGA level 1 and those are going to be hopefully released like Monday-ish. And she was having me like make like a recommend like a reference playlist on like Spotify to like send to her, and then she was like, you know, oh, like how many songs, and then like what adjectives, like what vibes, like romantic somber tone. Like I also kind of referred to some instruments. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's always really cool just like working with like audio composers and stuff. I don't know, it's like a different level of creative, I guess.
It's a lot of fun. And like reference tracks are so helpful. It just helps us pin down a genre because like when the world is your oyster, you don't know where to go. It's just like I can go in any direction. What can I do? Um, And so, especially if you send them reference tracks and then point out which parts, like which parts of the track that you really like, that's like the best.
Yeah, it's so fun to just be like, you know, get on like the same page and be like, oh, what's in my head is now in your head. It's awesome
Yeah.
and great and cool.
Ooh, oh man, there's a good question for you in the chat.
Ooh, fake voice sounds like Animal Crossing. Yes. Um, that one. So I don't know exactly how Animal Crossing does it because every time I try to get close to Animal Crossing, they have like created their own language, and so every time I try working on Animal Crossing type voices, I'm like slowly getting closer to what they did. But in general, it tends to be something along the lines of like short sound snippets that you trigger on the one that we recently tried was on every space in in like the line of dialogue. So that one tends to go like do 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 do. Um, and then you randomize the pitch. And so that's actually something you can really do in FMOD, where you basically have a multi-instrument of a bunch of different like phonemes basically, and then you randomize the pitch every time it gets played. And then the speed at which you trigger that sound is something that you can kind of tweak. It's a lot of tweaking, I think.
And like, what was it? Is there like a fundamental sort of sound design area to even get to the weird noise in that category too? What keyword would you
Yeah.
use?
So I started by searching like Animal Crossing voices. Literally. Or like text scrolling sounds is another one that I've searched.
I had a question about spatial audio. Like, if just like picturing in my head, like if the player character can be like anywhere at any time, isn't it really hard to mix for that when like there are different sounds coming from different places? Like, do you have to do a lot of play testing to make sure the sound sounds good from like various places?
Oh
Answer is
yes. Live update is beautiful for that, actually. And for mixing, actually, if you are a sound designer, sometimes putting an ambience in, especially if you want something very directional, putting it in mono helps a lot, so that you're not getting like weird stereo things happening when you get close to something on the right, but actually there's like weird stuff happening in the left channel. Um, so yeah, keeping sounds in mono sometimes helps. FMOD actually has a spatializer. Uh, you might have seen it in the UI, but
bubble.
if you, yeah, like with the fountain. Yeah, it's a lot of tweaking. Um, and a lot of times I tweak actually the range attenuation, because sometimes if you put like an emitter on a like 3D spatial sound and you don't hear anything, it's actually because the range is too short and you can't hear it. But a lot of testing with Unity in engine with the live update is basically how I do it. There's probably better ways, but that's what I do.
Yup. The one time I did it myself, it was gotta keep testing.
Yeah.
Any other questions? I think we're at roughly an hour now. Thank you all so much for coming, by the way. I'm so happy that people came.
Thank you so much for hosting this. It was a really good lecture and I learned a lot.
Yay, I'm so glad. Yeah. I will where should I drop the things afterwards, like for like the links to the presentation and stuff?
I'm gonna send them along with the recording to Jess. So I'll copy them from the chat, so that they can go in the YouTube description.
Rad. Sounds perfect.
Yeah,
Woohoo.
awesome. At least
Thank
I
you
think
so
that's where
much.
she's gonna put them. That's what
Yeah,
I predict would happen.
Yeah. Sounds great.
Yeah. Okay.
Amazing, y'all.
Yeah, I'm gonna do a little bit of advertising for events in the coming month. Just
Sounds
super
great.
quickly. So we always have our indie game lunch hour on Wednesdays. On Monday, September 16th is Pixels and You, which is a good introductory little workshop for doing pixel art. I'm actually gonna be going to that one. I think it's super cool. Wednesday, September 18th, we have Indie Game Foundry Live FAQ. And then, so, if you have any questions about our latest endeavor, then definitely pop in. Let's see, Friday, September 20th, we have 7 Steps to Starting Your Indie Studio. Friday, September 27th, we have Gardic Phone Night. I will be heading that. So you better come. You don't have to be an artist to join. It's a fun time no matter what. And then lastly, Monday, October 7th, we have our monthly playtest night. So bring your games for others to playtest. So yeah, thank you guys for coming. Thank you, Tess and Cris, for the wonderful lecture on FMOD.
No problem. Thank you for having us. This was fun.
Yeah.
Alrighty, y'all. I will bid you farewell.
All right, have a good one, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.